feel like the charge of the light brigade here. We've got protesters to the right of us, protesters to the left of us, protesters in front of us volleying and thundering. This is actually my first protest. I've watched protests, I've recorded protests, but I've never actually participated in a protest before. When there are lots of people crammed in an area shouting, I kind of freak out and want to leave, so I've avoided protests for most of my life. But I'm making an exception in this case, and let me explain why. Years ago in college, my best friend was a Pakistani Muslim. We were best friends for years. We spent years as best friends, and Nabil's family had come to the U.S. from Pakistan because their sect of Islam was persecuted by other sects of Islam. Why was his sect of Islam persecuted? Because in Surah 9 verse 73 of the Quran, Allah commands Muslims to wage jihad not only against unbelievers, but also against hypocrites, Muslims who aren't following Islam correctly. And for 14 centuries, Muslim groups have been labeling other Muslim groups hypocrites and persecuting them. When the persecuted minorities have a chance to flee, they flee. So Nabil's family came to the United States. Nabil tried to convince me that Islam is true. He tried to convert me to Islam. And he offered me a number of arguments to show me that Islam is true. But I had a habit. Anytime someone tried to present me with evidence, I wanted to read it for myself. So I started buying his sources, buying the hadith, buying the commentaries, and so on. And when I started looking at what his sources said, I started going back to him saying, this is very different from what you told me. You told me Muhammad was the greatest man who ever lived. Let's look at what your own sources say. You told me about the Quran. Let's look at what your sources actually say. After a few years, Nabil left Islam.